Hey Brainiacs, how you guys doing today? I'm Cam's Brain, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to another episode of My Humble Opinion. I appreciate you guys for doubling back and keeping up with me on the 48 Laws of Power, a book that we're doing based on a book that Robert Greene has created. If you guys aren't familiar with the 48 Laws of Power, it's somewhat of a self-help book. And what we do, in my humble opinion, at least for this series here, is we break down the law of power once a week. Today is no exception. We're going to be talking about the 12th law of power. And that is, use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. Now, again, as I always say, when you read this book and you're kind of dissecting it, more or less this book tells you how to be manipulative to other people. I like to acknowledge that we're outside today, and we are outside for one specific reason. I like different scenery. I'm an artist, as I usually say in my vlogs, if you guys don't watch those on Tuesday. So I figured for the next few episodes, I'm gonna find some cool murals outside that I can basically do the podcast behind as a nice backdrop. So you guys kind of got to excuse the noise. This is something new that I'm trying to work with to see how good it's going to turn out. But in any event, we're going to go ahead and we're going to work our way through this and see how good we can make this look. So yeah, this law of power of using selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim is very key. It is somewhat of a manipulative statement to say use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. I think more or less you have to be aware of somebody doing this to you just to get over on you. It's kind of like what we talked about on the 11th law of power, where it's a situation where you have to be careful of somebody basically holding something over you. In this instant, it's kind of weird because it's telling you to be careful about how honest you are about a particular situation. If I use this for myself in a personal realm, I guess for me, the way I use selective honesty and generosity, to disarm my victim would be a few different ways based on a few different scenarios. First of all, I don't like the concept or the word victim. I'll kind of change that into the person I'm dealing with. If I'm dealing with somebody, some people can be selective with their honesty in order to get you to feel comfortable with them, in order to do something to you that you're not expecting. So the bigger aspect of this really is being more aware of it. I don't necessarily have an instance where I've used this personally, just because I legitimately don't hold a standard to that concept of having a victim, for one, and being selective about my generosity. For me, I feel like if I'm going to be generous, or if I'm going to do something for somebody, I'm doing it out of the kindness of my heart. So at the end of the day, I've always been taught never give somebody something that you can't afford to lose. So I never necessarily have had a personal experience that will coincide with this particular law of power. But I think on a spiritual sense, you kind of have to be aware of somebody who will kind of help you through a hard time in order to get over on you. Or you have to be aware of somebody, whether it be a minister, whether it be a spiritual leader, that will kind of coach you through life positively in certain ways until there's a moment where they can get you to do what they want you to do based on the history that you guys have as it relates to them giving you good advice. It's kind of like the last episode where I said you have to be able to get whatever spiritual growth you're wanting to get for yourself so that you're only dependent on yourself. And I think that's the best way that it relates to anyone in a spiritual situation. Now, in a business situation, using selective honesty and generosity to disarm my customer, I can kind of speak to that in a sense of being able to tell people what they're going to get when they go to a different company or they deal with a different type of person that does what I do, and how it's not going to be as good as I would do it. Sometimes you could be honest in that if somebody goes to somebody else they may get a better experience or a different experience, but having the experience with you is going to prove to be a little bit more granular based on how generous you're going to be to them when it depends on what it is they're hiring you for. So for instance, if I give you a perfect example, I can say, yeah, you can go to this guy to get pictures and he may do a great job, but here's the generosity piece. Is he going to give you more than what he said? With me, not only am I going to give you more than what I said, I may show up early. I may be able to give you 10 prints instead of 5, which is something that this other guy isn't going to do. So in business, the way I use selective honesty and generosity to disarm my client, not my victim, my client, would be to kind of double back and let them know, yeah, you can get this service elsewhere, but with me, it's going to be a situation where I'm going to be more generous as to what I would do for you with you being my client. But other than that, this particular law of power is, in my opinion, just strictly manipulative to a certain sense, especially on a personal and spiritual level. In a relationship, you definitely have to beware of somebody that's being too nice and then they change throughout time. You got to remember and figure out how you can tell the red flags immediately when you're having a date with somebody or when you're just being able to get to know someone. There's always going to be a red flag that's going to show you somebody's true colors. So you just have to figure out what it is you're looking for in a relationship, what it is you're looking for in a friendship. And the minute that you see yourself developing that type of a relationship with somebody, you begin to ask those questions so that you can see those telltale signs. And before it gets to a time where you're disarmed and this person does something to you that you're not expecting. But yeah, I want you guys to leave your comments down below. Let me know how you feel about this. Do you feel like this parable is strictly manipulative? Do you feel like there's some good in it? Do you feel like it makes sense or it doesn't make sense? Let's get involved. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to another episode of My Humble Opinion. I am Cam's Brain, and I will see you next time. Peace.